In Lethal Weapon, two newly paired cops who are complete opposites must put aside their differences in order to catch a gang of drug smugglers. The film was released in 1987 and directed by none other than Richard Donner, written by Shane Black and Jeffrey Boam, and stars Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, Gary Busey, and Mitchell Ryan. Now, as always, we're going to begin with brief non-spoiler review. Dad, what did you think revisiting Lethal Weapon?
Lethal Weapon is another one that I can't be completely objective about because I've always loved these series, this whole series. Maybe we'll talk about it more too, but when it came down to it, this is another one. Anybody who's listened to our show before will know I came in more on the sequel. I came in on Lethal Weapon 2 more than the original Lethal Weapon. But since then, of course, I've grown to really like these. Of course, they are the staple for buddy cop. That genre. They are the ones that kind of set the tone for everyone. I would argue that the sequel probably did more for that than the first one. But I think that when you are looking at all these as a whole, I mean, it's an excellent series.
Definitely. I mean, I've only seen the first one, but off of this viewing, I have to say, if nothing else, structurally, it is very well written. In the dialogue and a lot of the acting choices, it obviously feels like an 80s movie.
Right.
But structurally, it works so well. It follows like the way that you would imagine a screenplay to go, especially when you're dealing with these two characters who sort of have these disparate beginning points and obviously in the end come together. I think it's really well made. It is.
And it's great. It's great casting. It was a great casting decision to start with, right? Because that's what made the movie was our two main leads there, obviously. And then of course all the people they bring around them, you get more background people in the future that become a staple, but these two together, I mean, it set the tone for this odd couple relationship, which is the standard when it comes to these buddy cops. And I think that it works really well. It still works really well.
Yeah, I mean, so Shade and I just recently reviewed the 2009 Watchmen movie. And in that, we talked a lot about the cast, too, and how if there were other people in those roles, the movie wouldn't have worked. I think the same is easily said for this. Obviously, Mel Gibson, but we're not going to discuss it, but
problematic.
Yeah, that's one way of saying it. Mel Gibson and Danny Glover here, they work so well together. The chemistry is undeniable. And in a buddy cop movie, if you don't have that chemistry, then obviously the thing's just going to fail.
Well, and this really falls on the casting director too, because I've seen in a few different things that I've looked at is the Danny Glover's character, Murtaugh, had no race, had nothing defining him specifically, right? They just knew he was going to be an older dude. And the casting director just saw the color purple and thought that our man there, starting
Danny
already,
Glover.
Danny Glover would be perfect for that. And he was. He worked out great. Now, the interesting part is they wanted an older guy. He's celebrating his 50th birthday, but at the time of the filming, he was only 40 years old.
Oh,
so
I was gonna say he looks pretty good for 50.
Yes, he does. And when we talk about non-spoilery, when we're talking about this being the basis for buddy cop movies, I think the Danny Glover character may be the basis for this whole dad core thing we're getting now. There's nobodies,
sure,
right? The nobody movies. The older guy who can take over and take charge and stuff. I mean, that feels like Danny Glover might have been the first instance of that. So
definitely, yeah, the badass old man, if
right,
you will.
I'm too old for this, right? That line.
Yeah.
It just kind of it hits, and then, like I said, it is the dad core, the first dad core I know of. So.
Sure. Now, I think at this point we're going to transition into the spoiler section. So if you haven't seen this movie that is 40 years old, prepare to be spoiled. I think, okay, and maybe technically this isn't a spoiler because it happens in like the first act or whatever. The choice of starting off Mel Gibson's character in the place where he is a really it's a bold choice,
right?
But I think obviously it works very well throughout the rest of the movie. It helps. I think it's tough because the main character of the movie, I feel like you're meant to think it's Martin Riggs, but it's really Roger Murtaugh,
right?
Even though Riggs is kind of more the guy who changes throughout all of this.
Yes, he does. And he has the growth. Right.
Yeah.
He's at the beginning, he's got the gun to his head. At the end, he's giving away the bullet that he saved for that. Right?
Exactly.
So I mean, that is some serious growth there. He finds, you could say he finds a family he didn't have, that kind of thing. So it's very interesting to do that and get that in there. Now, we mentioned written by Shane Black. Of course, we talked about Shane Black with Monster Squad.
Yes, I was going to bring that up.
But he actually wrote this movie. I've heard that he wrote this movie in college. And it got shopped around, and it actually got kind of a bidding war when it came down to studios buying it. But it was actually quite a bit darker to start with. Richard Donner came in, and they kind of collaborated and made it a little bit more lighter, which I think worked, and it's obviously worked, But he had a lot more of a darker tone to it. Riggs was going to be a little bit more of a mental case, and go overboard and that kind of thing a little bit more. So the way that they did it, I think, was just enough.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good team between the director and the producer and Shane Black and Jeffrey Boam, who came in and did some rewrites, I believe.
Right.
But yeah, like you said, he wrote this in college. I think he was 22 when he sold it. And I know this because it's mentioned often in a screenwriting book I have.
Okay.
It's a famous story, maybe apocryphal. He got paid $250,000 for the screenplay.
That's what I heard too.
Which, adjusting for inflation, is like $750, which makes me mad. But anyways, the apocryphal story is that he had like you said, he'd written it, but thought it was like maybe too crazy that nobody'd want it, and so he basically threw it away. And then eventually dusted off the screenplay and gave it to his agent, who shopped it around, which led to the bidding war. So, it's a crazy story.
It is, and I'm glad. I'm glad for all of it. I'm glad that it got picked up. I'm glad whatever worked out. Whatever brought it all together with the casting, with Richard Donner taking over. I think at one point, and IMDb trivia is sometimes a little suspect on this, but It mentions like they wanted Leonard Nimoy to direct. And Nimoy didn't want to do an action movie, which is good.
Yeah,
I don't think he's action movie material after seeing some of the other stuff that he did direct. But I think
you don't think Star Trek 4 stands up as an action?
Maybe I'm thinking more. What isn't 3 Men and a Baby the one that he did? I've compared it to that. So that's definitely a different setup. But it is interesting. And, we talked about casting before we get too far from this. I've seen it in a few different places that it was actually could have been Bruce Willis, which at the time, was unknown. He coming off of TV. But it was actually, so Joel Silver was the producer on both this and Die Hard.
It's just,
and these guys, yes, were both, Mel Gibson and Bruce Willis were both up for both movies. And then they ended up switching, I guess, is what I've seen in a few different places. But I mean, I think that here we got two of the better movies that we could talk about if we're talking about cop type of things.
Sure.
And the casting worked out perfectly.
Yeah, that's curious. I would like to see what that alternate timeline would be like if the roles had been switched. I don't think either movie would have worked as good.
No, I think that it worked out just right. And of course, Mel Gibson, just coming off of Mad Max and everything, so he kind of already had that wacky Aussie going, So I think that obviously that played for him. So.
Sure. I think so obviously it's very evident from the opening scene, but the running theme throughout all of this is, suicide, right?
Right.
I think to sort of the obvious example of that is clearly, Martin Riggs, like we talk about. But I do think it's interesting that after that opening image, we see Danny Glover, who is, like you mentioned, it's his birthday. He just turned 50. He's got the beard. He's in the tub, getting a little rub-a-dub-dub going.
Right.
And then his kids come in, and his oldest daughter, who for some unknown reason has a thing for Mel Gibson.
She's at that age, and Mel Gibson's cute, I've heard.
I guess. Sure. I don't know. His hair's kind of whack, but it was the 80s, different time. She comes in and she goes, you're getting gray in your beard. And she explicitly says, it makes you look old.
Right.
But then, she just says, but it's okay because I love you, which is like still kind of putting him down.
Yeah, it's a little backhanded compliment there. Yeah.
But I love that shot of Danny Glover just looking at himself in the mirror, which it's weird to have a full wall mirror next to the bathtub.
Well, this was the 80s. It's not as weird as you think.
Okay, I wouldn't have liked that. I don't want to stare at myself as I come out of the bathtub. It's a little bit of a unflattering angle.
So when you have small rooms, mirrors make it look bigger. See, it's a design aesthetic.
Oh, yeah. That's why those houses built in the 80s are still worth so much.
You betcha. Well, and like I say, the best part of that, like you mentioned, is the next scene we see him. He's walking through the police department and he's shaved.
Yes.
Right? And it takes a little bit. And I do like they even throw out, we talk about the writing, the one lines, but he's talking with some other gentleman for a little while, and eventually the guy's, "Oh, did you shave your beard?" And he says, "Some detective." Yeah. So those little lines, those little pick-me-ups there, I think are pretty good. They work out pretty good. That you get a little hint to the dialogue and what they've written and what they're and I'm curious how much of that is Shane Black and how much of that is Donner.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting when you see that stuff. All of that came together for this movie.
Definitely. Yeah, those little flavor text things that don't relate to anything, but especially for Danny Glover, they really give you a sense of the character. Like when he's walking around the house and his wife is trying to make breakfast and she drops an egg on the kitchen floor and she says, "Don't step on the egg." And he's like, "Oh, what am I thinking? Where else would you put the eggs?" Or something like that.
Yeah, I got to watch for eggs. Yeah. And then, there is a running joke about his wife's cooking as well.
Yes.
Throughout everything. So those kind of things worked out pretty good. And again, they give you that buddy cop, that odd couple that, you can see where these guys would get somewhat of a rapport. And, it comes up a lot in the sequels. A lot more, and they try to get a little bit more jokey with it and stuff, but I don't think it goes too far off the rails. Sometimes it does.
Sure.
But, sometimes it feels like they're trying too hard.
Mm-hmm.
But in this movie, it doesn't start off trying too hard, right? It starts off as pretty straightforward. Oh, I can see how these guys would maybe just, kind of start coming together a little bit,
mm-hmm.
right?
Definitely. And yeah, you see that from the very beginning. I mean, you've got the odd couple thing. I said they're completely at odds. Danny Glover tackles Mel Gibson in the police station because he thinks he's a crook. And then they're walking out to their car. And the cinematography of this shot I really enjoy. They're completely in silhouette. And, they're talking about just things. They're chatting for a little bit. But then the moment that they start to talk about something that they both understand and enjoy, the light passes over their faces and you can see them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really cool choice to me. But then, we have the classic line where Danny Glover's like, "Well, we got to register you as a lethal weapon."
Right. We get the name.
Yes. I love that scene. And I think, again, it really sets the scene, so to speak, for the relationship that these characters are going to build throughout the rest of the movie.
Right. And I think that, you talk conversations and dialogue. There's also, they start getting to the point, and there's one point where they're in the gun range, the cop gun range that you always see in shows, and they're talking and they're just going back and forth, finishing the whole logic, finishing the steps, and it was all about Dixie, and stuff like that. And they're working, you can tell they're working it out together. And stuff. And then they realize that's pretty thin, but then they run with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it plays off that whole cop that, I'm not a detective, so I don't know, but I like the way that they do it on screen where they're just kind of working through this process. And there are sometimes when I've gone back and, this time when I went back and rewatched it, I kind of see a little bit of they're taking some leaps here to get to, oh, we solved it,
mm-hmm.
or something like, there's some jumps. It feels like, I don't know. It didn't feel as clean, I guess, as, and that's partially because I've watched how many years of Law and Order since then where they definitely have to lead you through it, and stuff. Whereas these guys are just cops that are figuring it out,
mm-hmm.
so.
But as far as that goes, I think I do agree there's certainly some logic jumps, but I think the way that they get around that is by having the lines where they're like pretty thin. This is
mm-hmm.
there's not much here, and they're just they're going to Dixie's house, which I think is the midpoint of the movie. They're just running it down because you might as well check out all of the angles.
Right.
And then after that is when they're like, oh, we were actually on to something.
Well, and it even shows them, shortly after, I think it's shortly after that. Yeah, it's shortly after that. they're just wandering around the streets, talking to, streetwalkers and stuff. And so obviously they're doing other work besides what we're seeing in the movie, but you're condensing it down to get our story that we need. So,
well, yeah, I mean, the whole movie takes place over the course of what, like 2 days? Because
sure feels like it.
There's one moment where Danny Glover goes to bed and Martin wakes him up in the next morning with a cup of coffee.
Yes. So it escalates pretty quick. Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, like you say, in that 48-hour period, you could assume they're doing at least some detective work.
Oh yeah. They're definitely rolling through things. And again, yeah, it's nighttime when they're wandering around. Yeah. It's pretty good stuff. So, like I said, I mean, this is the model that I go off of for something, and we've talked about this in a lot of things, right? A lot of these movies that we go back and watch, we can see the beginnings of what eventually becomes what we've seen, right? So even though maybe this felt a little clunky, or maybe it had a little bit going on that didn't quite line up, it's definitely the beginnings that fleshes out into, I mean, even in this series alone, by the time you get to Lethal Weapon 4, I mean, you've got the full buddy cop thing just kind of laid out perfectly, right? To the point where they're in Lethal Weapon 4. I mean, they're basically doing their own tropes, and that kind of thing.
That's the thing, is that I think looking at this movie now, I guess, like I mentioned earlier, we're almost 40 years. That's crazy. Almost 40 years after it came out, right? And so looking at it from my viewpoint, it's like, okay, well, maybe this feels a bit formulaic. But then, like you said, it's like this was the thing that basically set the formula.
Right.
It feels formulaic because it was so good that everything afterwards just copied it.
Yeah, everything realized this is the good way to do it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, how much did this movie make? I know it was made on a pretty slim budget. Let's see. Yeah, 15 million, and then opening weekend, it only made 6. But then gross, US and Canada was 65 and worldwide is 120. So It's like, no wonder they made 4. And I think they're talking about another one, and they made a TV reboot or something like this.
Oh, another one. I need a Lethal Weapon 5. I didn't realize I did. So that's one of them things I didn't know I needed in my life.
Yeah, here we go. Who knows if this is actually happening, though.
Now, I will say, we can, it doesn't even have a plot. That's great. I will say that there was a Lethal Weapon TV series that was, a network TV version of this type of thing.
Okay.
Which was actually pretty decent. It had one of the Wayans brothers as Murtaugh, and then a guy I'd never seen before as Riggs, but it's the same kind of thing. He's a little wacky and that kind of thing. But I think it went for a couple seasons. I don't know, but it was decent as far as network TV shows go. So it had some fun bits to it. So.
Yeah, okay, so let's see. Who is this? Clayne Crawford. That's a good name.
There you go.
Martin Riggs.
And I can't imagine that we've seen him, and he may be in other things that I have not seen, but I don't recognize him from anything else. So.
Yeah, I have no idea. But he's got a good name. He's a good name for show business, for sure. I think I'm not gonna say that right now.
I mean, the best thing that came out of that show is Greta Van Fleet was a band that was it must have just been kind of coming out and selling off and licensing their songs. So that's the first time I've heard Greta Van Fleet, and I love them. So
okay.
So that's probably the best thing that came out of that series.
All right, I guess whatever. Yes, I will tell you this later. I was correct about the thing, but I'm not going to say it here.
Okay. Good.
Anyways, I love throughout the entire beginning of this movie. It is constantly like, Riggs being crazy and Danny Glover being like, hey, man, stop being so crazy. And it gets to a point where Riggs, he's like, all right, I'll try. Whatever.
Right.
Whatever you want, man. You've been so nice to me, like really sarcastically, but kind of also meaning it a little bit. And he's, they're doing it his way. But invariably, Riggs just cannot do it.
Right.
Like we get the scene where they go to, I don't even know whose house that is. There's the two ladies who are
whoever sold her the drugs, right?
Yes, that's
right.
what
that was. So whoever sold her the laced drugs or something.
Yeah.
Like
So
that.
this must be in the second part of Act 2, I guess.
Right.
Because this is right before Michael Hunsaker dies. But they're going there, and Murtaugh shoots the guy in the leg.
Right.
And he's like, I'm just gonna go stand over here happy about how I didn't have to kill anybody. And he's like, go ahead and cuff him. And so Martin. I keep calling him Martin. I don't know why. It is his name, but they always call him Riggs in the movie. Anyways, he starts and he cuffs him. He's trying to cuff him. And then the guy pulls a gun and almost shoots Murtaugh.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately Riggs just blasts him in the chest and he falls into the pool, which has like a cellophane plastic
well, you know,
topper.
it's just the pool topper. Yes. You know, and that is a pretty dangerous thing, you know. So,
It is, yes. Well, you know, there's a reason that they have those warnings on plastic
That's
bags
right.
these days. But then they both immediately jump in the pool. And I think Riggs comes out of it and is basically like, my bad.
And what's the line there? Murtaugh says, have you killed any?
Is there anybody you met that you haven't killed?
Yeah, and I haven't killed you yet.
Yeah. That it's such a great line.
It is.
Well, and another part that sort of would have been super easy to just not do, but Riggs gets out of the pool super easy. You know, he's a young, fit guy, and Danny Glover is there just like with his arms on top of the thing, just like breathing so heavy. It's like, you haven't done anything,
right?
You know, but you're 50. It's another thing where it just brings forward that theme of like what to do when you're aging and wondering if like, well, you're too old for this.
Yes.
It's great. I love that sort of continues throughout the whole movie.
It is. And of course, you know, the movie eventually progresses to the point where his daughter's kidnapped, right? And it's like, okay, now we are doing it your way.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
And we're going to get bloody. And every guy in the movie theater is going, oh yeah, you know, here we go. So.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought that scene up because that's another one where I'm like, this feels so quintessentially 80s in the way that it's shot, but it looks so good because like you mentioned, Brienne has just gotten kidnapped. They're at the family house at the Murtaugh home. And they're just hanging out in front of a Christmas tree because you forget it's Christmas. And
which is I heard it. That's a Shane Black staple.
Oh,
he loves to put Christmas. He likes to juxtapose Christmas and tough stuff.
Okay. Well, we got Iron Man 3 at Christmas time.
Yep.
I guess Monster Squad was Halloween, which makes sense.
Yeah, but that's monsters. That don't count.
Yeah. It would have been weird if that one was set at Christmas time.
That's a good juxtaposition, though.
There's actually a really good idea for Monster Squad 2 where it's Christmas.
Now it's Christmas.
But it's set around like, you know, Krampus and like gremlins and goblins and things.
There you go.
Very scary German Christmas creatures. Anyways, so that scene, again, it feels so quintessentially 80s because the lighting is so harsh.
Right.
But with the red light coming through, it just looks so good.
It is. And you know, it's getting darker, right? So we're deciding we're going to just be sniping people from a distance and that sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, it's darker talking about it and it's darker when we do it. You know, it definitely sets the tone a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that scene is really good. I think it's interesting. It's an interesting choice to have, like I joked about earlier, to have Rianne have a thing for Mel Gibson, but it does lead to some good moments. And it obviously gives Riggs a slightly more of a motivation to be here because there's this sweet girl who, for whatever reason, likes him. And it gives some great character moments, been back and forth between the two, especially at the ending scene. And
I have an inkling, you know, I noticed in the credits, it's introducing that actress. You know, so something tells me they thought she was going somewhere. Introducing Tracy Wolf. So I think that they were trying to give her more, even though she just didn't have that much to do. You know, I don't know if they're trying to set her up as a scream queen or something like that, because really all she ends up doing is screaming and running. But yeah.
Well, basically all she's done is Lethal Weapon and its sequels.
Right. So I don't think she's really pulled off that introducing credit too much.
Yeah. But it led to some fun moments. I will say, granted, she's supposed to be playing, you know, a young character, not very subtle in her attention and affections towards Martin Riggs.
Oh, I can't wait till you see the second one. Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's a setup for a lot of banter, which is great.
Sure.
What happens in the second one as she grows up and starts doing adult jobs and stuff like that. It's great stuff.
That is an interesting. How old do you think she's supposed to be in this movie? Because I would have guessed like 16 or 17.
Well, she's hanging out with some dude. Yeah, I that's my assumption too, is we're talking like late high school, like almost done high school kind of thing. At one point they say she got in trouble for smoking weed in her room or something, you know, back in the 80s. And she wanders away. I can drink a beer, but I can't smoke weed. So I'm wondering if we're talking, I think it was 18 or 19 you could drink at some point. And depends what state you were at the time before we got all the federal laws locking us down. So, maybe that would, if we were to look back a little bit, that might give us her exact age that they're running with there. But yeah, it is kind of fun, under my roof kind of thing. But,
yeah. Well, and that leads to some good moments too. Cause as she's walking away, she's like sitting up there drinking a 6-pack.
Right.
And then also, Murtaugh and Riggs are on top of the boat and they're talking about the case or whatever. And Murtaugh's like, well, so what have you learned? And Riggs says, I learned that you don't know anything about boats and that your daughter smoked weed in the house. Right. That was pretty funny.
It is kind of fun. And like I said, they're really setting up this banter and really, and setting up that relationship, and again, I think if I'm remembering right in my timeline, that happens after the pool incident we were just talking about, where he kind of saves Murtaugh's life a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think, Murtaugh is starting to lean into okay, you had to shoot him to save my life, blah, blah, that sort of thing.
But yeah, they're warming up to each other for sure.
Right. And he's starting to realize a little bit, I think, that, but, one thing we didn't talk about is there's the scene before that where Riggs is helping the jumper.
Yes, that classic scene.
Right. He takes him into that shop and stuff, and he actually pulls the trigger, which is crazy. And Murtaugh gets his, fingers in the hammer.
Guard, yeah.
Right.
Or the hammer, whatever.
Right. To block the shot, which hurts. But it really, it kind of shows, I think, the start about how nuts that this dude's feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, and I don't know if, nuts is a interesting, because throughout the movie, it's Murtaugh realizing that he isn't crazy, but he is suicidal.
Right.
At the end of that scene, they're having this crazy argument, and Riggs, he has this scene where, do you think I don't wake up every morning thinking about, putting a bullet.
Right.
And when that scene ends is when he storms out. And as he's walking out, Murtaugh turns to him and says, you're not looking for the pension.
Right.
You're not trying to claim to be crazy so you can get some money.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, so he knows, it's not a crazy thing as much as he's seeing that grief, and stuff. And I think that's the thing, is you're bringing up this huge argument. In this huge argument, you're bringing things up, and it gets to the point, like I said, where he pulls the trigger,
mm-hmm.
right? And I don't know, just like you say, it shows Murtaugh that he's dealing with a real thing here. But then I don't know, and they don't play this up at all. But Martin getting a family and getting people to, like you said, a girl to save because it's his partner's daughter,
mm-hmm.
who kind of had a thing for him. But I think it's more just because it's his partner's daughter, right? And he just wants to help. And he sees this great family that he didn't have,
mm-hmm.
and I think it works out pretty good.
Definitely. Well, and, throughout the movie, at the end, I think it's that he realizes that he has like a purpose still, right? Because in the beginning, he's like, what is the point? I mean, I've lost, my wife of, I think the psychiatrist says 11 years or something like
mm-hmm.
that. And at the end of it, he's like, oh, I'm not actually alone. I have this whole welcoming family of like 5 people. Because they got like 3 kids, I think.
Yeah, there's 3 of them, yes.
This family of 5 people who are just bring him into Christmas dinner or whatever. And I think it's also interesting because I think maybe it's not so clear, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think in the beginning, I mentioned that scene when Danny Glover is wistfully staring at himself in the mirror in the bathtub. I think to me, it's clear that that's a moment where he's like, man, I'm old. Too old for this.
Right.
What he's also having that same thought of like, what is the point anymore? And I think throughout the movie, spending the time with Riggs, he's like, oh man, this is what it's actually like to be at that point where you have nothing left.
Well, and it's interesting to say that too, because, and again, this is, I think it was in the IMDb trivia. I might've seen it somewhere else too, but there was somewhat of an alternate ending where Murtaugh's telling me, I'm looking to retire soon,
mm-hmm.
And Riggs tells him don't. And stuff. So, I mean, I think that would be your thing is I'm too old for this. I should be done. And now he's got Riggs, and the two of them together keep going,
Yeah.
And it's kind of a neat way to, for both of them to keep on doing something or getting, what do you want to say? A passion for everything and realizing they can still do something other than just being old or being done.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. And well, I like, in the beginning when I'm forgetting the names now. I'm turning into you. When Murtaugh
nailed it.
When Murtaugh finds out that he's getting a partner, his reaction is like, partner again?
Right.
Like he hates it so much. And then obviously at the end of the movie, he's glad to have Riggs there. He's glad that he's had somebody. And I think part of that is obviously they've spent time together. They've got some banter. They're a little bit of friends. And also I think Murtaugh realizes that, I mean, it doesn't cross his mind that it's because of Riggs that his daughter was taken in the first place, really. But without Riggs being there, his daughter would 100% be gone.
Right.
And there would have been no way that he alone could have saved her.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Because it definitely is. We're going to do it my way, and that's the only way it works, right? And then it gets intense.
Yeah. I think I mentioned at the beginning, I think we're going to start to wind things down here.
Well, before we go away, though, I want to talk Gary Busey. Right? Okay. So, that's the other...
I was going to lead into that, yeah.
I think that's the other good casting choice when we think about bad guys. And in these movies, you'll see the bad guy's only that movie, right?
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. It's not, James Bond where we have Blofeld for multiple movies or anything
for like
that.
60 years.
Right. So he's got the bad guy, and it's it's the problem of the week to solve or whatever. But Busey, I think... he credits this movie with reviving his career, and stuff, but they picked him because he's big and imposing, and he had to put on a bunch of muscle for this role and that sort of thing. But I think it worked out pretty good, getting him in there and getting him to be the bad guy. I think that it worked out now. And then you also throw in the dude who I know because we used to watch Dharma and Greg a lot, the colonel or whatever, the
Mitchell
general.
Ryan.
Yeah. Who's the main bad guy or whatever, but and he just kind of that evil general who's I'm gonna light my subordinate's arm on fire because he'll do it.
Yeah, well, that's a classic screenwriting trope. If you're one of your heroes, or if your hero, whatever, is a little bit of a questionable individual, all you have to do is make the bad guy worse.
Right.
And so burning your subordinate's arm is pretty bad.
Well, he's very loyal.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know the intelligent side, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and this is the point that I was going to lead into, is that I said at the beginning that this movie is structurally very sound. My one complaint, as far as, the way in which the story goes, is that I think we get rid of the villains in the wrong order. We get rid of the top dog first, and then we get rid of the lieutenant.
Right.
That's the opposite of the way that these things normally go. You would normally have your big fight with Gary Busey, Joshua, that's his character's name. Yeah. You would have your big fight with him when you free the daughter, but then the general is the one who gets away, and he has this last gasp to go and try and kill the family or whatever.
Right. I think that the way this worked out, I think it actually worked out pretty good. And it's interesting, Riggs is when he can't catch the car on foot. Imagine that. He's kind of like written him off. Oh yeah, he's gone. He'll be out of, he's taken off. We lost him. Mm-hmm. Right. And then that's when Murtaugh says, well, no, he knows my house, and then they realize what they have to do, to go save the family. So I think that worked out pretty good. Gives him something else to do. Sure. Right? Someone else to save. But
and he get a good fight scene with Mel Gibson in the rain, where he gets to do his jujitsu that we've been talking about the whole movie.
Right. And it even mentions that, and I've seen that they wanted to work hard on giving that a different feel. Mm-hmm. The capybara or whatever they use.
Yeah, capoeira.
Yeah. Capybara, that's an animal.
Yeah, I think it's the world's largest rodent.
Yeah, I'm running with that one. They do the capybara fight. Which is a couple rodents smacking each other. But I think that it works out, and it's something different, right? And like you say, and that was one thing I saw in interviews that I wasn't quite hip to at first. But, they were going to start out the movie with Mel Gibson in a bar and some guys coming up and trying to take his money, and he puts them down, right? Mm-hmm. And then there was another deleted scene where there's actually a school shooting or a playground shooting.
Oh.
And Mel Gibson gets up there and stops it, right? And he, of course, it's a little wacky how he does it and stuff. They even had it shot. I've seen scenes from it and stuff like that. Oh, excuse me. Hopefully you can edit that out.
I'm going to leave it in just because you said that.
But what they wanted to do is they wanted to tell you how dangerous he is and he should be registered as a lethal weapon and build up to that, right? And that was the point of that final fight, is just to build up to the point where this guy, okay, yeah, this dude is a little bit more than just some cop, in that he, he has that history and he can do all these things. And, he's got the huge sniper rifle and he even says it at some point, only 10 guys in the world can make that shot or something like that.
I think he said it was like his first kill or something.
Yeah, it was something like that when he was young, and that sort of thing. So that there's a lot going on. And of course, from movies since then, we've got people who are in that position and how they get a little, PTSD and that sort of thing. I don't know all the terms, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And how that could build up to be who he is. But they wanted it to start out as, oh, he's just crazy, to the point where, oh, he's not. Like you say, he can really do these things, and we can see why he's a little messed up at times.
Yeah. I think starting it out this way, the way that they introduce him is really smart with the drug bust or whatever.
Right.
Especially because you get to see that theme of him, basically wanting suicide by cop or criminal.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it really evident, and I agree. I think it's smart to save the big bombastic fight to show really how dangerous he is until the end.
Right.
If this were a movie that were being made today, chances are the opening scene would begin with Martin Riggs in was it Vietnam? Or was it Murtaugh was in
I think
Vietnam.
he said something about Laos or something. Or,
yeah. Wherever.
I'm not up on his. I think they were all supposed to be Vietnam, that kind of thing.
Yeah. You would have had that opening scene be Riggs in the war doing some crazy stuff and have him see something that scars him. And then you would transition to the present where we find out that his wife has died. And that's why in all of this.
Right.
I think it's smart to do it this way. But before we do final thoughts, I want to ask Dad, what do you think is the best scene in this movie?
Well, see, that one's a tough one, because we've got and I know you warned me of this and I didn't think about it too much. So we've got the dramatic scene with the suicide, right? Like we talked about, we introduce him in a way. I mean, obviously he's got that drug bust, but then we introduce a little bit more of him having that issue. And, hearing more about that, how he had a blank in the gun, but even a blank would have been pretty damaging.
Oh yeah.
If he would have hit.
You can get hurt for sure.
Yep. Little tangled up.
Like the camera's just going to be you.
But I still like and I always have liked that end fight scene, that one-on-one, that
in the rain.
Right. And it's one of those things where and they did it a little different. Now, since then, of course, we've seen, Batman Begins, where they do that kind of fighting style, that close-up fighting style and that sort of thing. So we've seen that, but prior to this, that is something that you didn't see very much. And I think they, like I said, they wanted to make it a little bit different in the way that he does that. And then, I don't know, probably the best little bit in that is he's still a cop, because they throw him the baton, the cop baton, and stuff. And he's using that almost in a martial arts way. But, you can tell that he's a cop who took his cop training pretty seriously.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that works. So I don't know, like I said, as a climactic scene, I think I really like that.
Yeah, I think both of those are good choices. Obviously the final scene, like you said, it works because it is so different. It's not just a random gunfight or whatever. And then the early scene that you talked about is so good, especially at the end, because you see Mel Gibson break down into tears immediately after we've seen him be this crazy hard guy. And I think the stinger of that, where he says, "I'll see you later," much later, is the reason that scene sticks out to me. But my favorite scene, to go to a completely different tonal direction, my favorite scene is
the bathtub.
Yes. How did you know? No, it's the scene, and I've avoided talking about it the entire episode, so I could save it to now, but I want to talk about it a lot. is after we have that scene in the bar where, Murtaugh stops the gun from going off.
Right.
It begins with Murtaugh standing up against the fence, which I think I mentioned before is the only part of this movie I'd seen. Which the only part I saw was him standing against the fence. I had no idea what came after, the context or anything. Anyways, he's talking to the psychiatrist, says his iconic line, and then he gets in the car. Riggs is like, "Well, do you have a bad personal phone call?" And he's like, "Do you want me to drive?" And Murtaugh is like, "No, I'm driving. You've got a death wish."
Right.
Ironically, he was parked on top of a bridge, which is pretty dangerous and illegal. And then he also does a U-turn in the middle of the bridge.
Well, you saw the phone. He had to get high in order to get a signal.
Yeah. But the reason that I like that scene so much is because to me, on the car ride, I think this is when they're actually going either to Dixie's house or to the guy who sold Amanda Hunsaker the drugs.
Right.
I think it's
to
that house. One. Yeah. They're just driving and they're talking and stuff. And they obviously start off a little combative. And then Martin Riggs makes a joke or something. And Murtaugh starts laughing. And they have like such a nice back and forth. To me, this is the moment where they start to see each other, not just as colleagues and partners, but as friends.
Right.
And to me, that's the best scene because that's like the point of the movie. We talked the whole time about like the buddy cop and how this revitalized the whole genre and set a million spin-offs and sequels and imitations and stuff. When I was watching that, I was like, this is the moment where I realized their chemistry is so good.
Right.
Now, we talked about best scene. Who do you think is the best actor in the movie?
Do we have to limit it to one? Because I think the two leads only work because they're work.
Yeah.
Right?
Because the chemistry.
So I'll say Mel Gibson, you say...
I was going to say Danny Glover anyway. There you go. So it works.
I think that, like you say, the chemistry is what makes that work.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen Mel Gibson in lots of things, and obviously he's a brilliant actor.
Great director,
problematically brilliant actor. How about that? There
well, so is Roman Polanski.
Yeah, they're all
in different ways,
yeah,
but
everybody's problematic. But I think it is that it's the two of them together, right? And maybe that's a cop out because they are the movie,
yeah,
right? I mean, there's lots of supporting cast, but besides the bad guys all being dead and his family just being his family, they are the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I think between the two of them, they're working it pretty good. That's what, we had to remember to talk about Gary Busey because we talked about them this whole time.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that that combination, that casting, those two together worked out pretty well.
Definitely. Yeah. I don't think I could have said it better than that. Yeah. Perfectly nailed it on the head. So final thoughts. Do you think if you weren't going to make me watch this to review it, would you have recommended this to me in any case?
I feel like I've told you to watch it before without this.
Oh, if you have, I would have forgotten.
No, I mean, that's the thing and we talk about that with a lot with these movies. If I'm saying, if somebody is asking me what movie should I watch that I haven't seen and they haven't seen this one, I'd say you should definitely watch this.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I would argue you should, like we're going to do, move on to the second one too. Third and fourth are great, but I think that this is the beginning of the genre, like you said, and it gives you you can still appreciate it, even though, like you say, it feels formulaic. It feels like something we've seen a lot. I think you can appreciate the movie for what it was. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the casting's great.
Yeah, it feels formulaic in the same way that like Iron Man now feels formulaic, right? Because every MCU origin movie has just redone Iron Man. It's like this is the one that started it, and for that, it definitely gets some credits. And there's some great parts just in it outside of that. So I would also recommend it.
Well, good.
I would probably rank this one higher than Willow.
Oh snap! Yeah. We beat Willow.
I don't know if we've had one of those for a long time.
It's tough. It's Willow's a high bar.
I definitely need to rewatch it. I really, really do. But yeah, I think we're going to leave it there. And as Dad alluded, we're going to be back next time to talk about Lethal Weapon 2. Comment down below if you agree with us that the first Lethal Weapon is a great movie. Or if you disagree, you'll be wrong, but that's okay. In any case, like and subscribe for more videos, and we will see you guys